On July 7, 2025, President Donald J. Trump pulled out his pen and sent 14 letters to countries around the globe. Each letter had one purpose: to say, "Hi, you're being taxed." No negotiation, no trade talks, just a polite "His Excellency," followed by economic firebombing. Tariffs ranged from 10% to 40%. The global reaction, a mix of horror, panic, and in Myanmar's case, pure joy. Welcome to the Trump tariff doctrine. If you export it, I'll tax it, unless I like you, or unless you tweet something nice. Let's take a trip around the world, one angry customs office at a time. Welcome to Pastcast, where the past echoes through the present. Vietnam got the letter, blinked, and blinked again, then picked up the phone and said, "Let's talk." It became the first country to reach a deal. Trump gave them a 20% tariff, down from 46%. In return, Vietnam agreed to stop fake Made in Vietnam labels on Chinese goods, crack down on shady trade routes, and open its market to more U.S. stuff, like corn and Boeing dreams. It wasn't love. It was trade Stockholm syndrome. But hey, Nike stock rose and Vietnam smiled through gritted teeth. Philippines got a 19% rate, slightly better than Vietnam. President Marcos Jr. didn't yell. He just sent over 0 tariffs on U.S. imports in return. You want access? Sure. Just don't raise it again, okay? No press conference, no drama, just quiet surrender, ASEAN style. And somewhere in Manila, someone whispered, "Was this a discount?" Singapore didn't retaliate. Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong calmly said, "This is the biggest shock the global trading system has ever faced," and then delivered the mic drop line of the decade. Once you add tariffs, you can't remove them. Too many people depend on them. In other words, Trump may leave the White House someday, but the tariffs are here to stay. Singapore quietly set up a task force, bought US LNG, and carried on. Because nothing scares Singapore more than supply chain disruption. Indonesia, they smiled and said, "Let's deal." Boom! Trump cut it to 19%. In return, Indonesia dropped tariffs on 99% of US goods. Why not 100%? Well, Muslims don't take bacon. Trump cheered it as a huge win for US automakers, tech, and farmers. Malaysia got a 25% tariff, higher than Vietnam and the Philippines, and 1% higher than the initial rate. Why? Because they didn't rush. No flashy deal, no 0 tariffs back. Just a polite, "Let's wait for ASEAN." Trump doesn't do patience, so he gave them the hesitation tax, 1% extra. Malaysia stayed calm. No panic, no press. Because Anwar thinks the world still needs Malaysian chips. Myanmar got hit with the highest tariff of all, 40%. Most countries panicked. Min Aung Hlaing? He smiled, not because of the tariff, but because the letter began with "His Excellency." For a man whose regime isn't recognized by most of the world, getting official mail from Washington was like being uncancelled by democracy itself. And his response? He barely mentioned the tariff. Instead, he wrote 3 pages about how he and Trump were the same. "You lost an election in 2020? I did too. So I temporarily took over." Yes, he compared Trump's defeat to his military coup. One held rallies and refused to concede. The other shut down the internet, jailed opponents, and declared martial law. But in Min Aung Hlaing's mind, they were brothers in arms, victims of rigged democracy. He even praised Trump for shutting down Voice of America, because nothing bonds authoritarian regimes like canceling journalists. To him, the 40% tariff was beside the point. He got a letter, a title, a nod. And in diplomacy, that's worth more than exports. Trump cut Japan's auto tariffs from 27.5% to 15%. In return, Japan pledged $550 billion in U.S. investments, including a shopping spree for Boeing jets. They gave up cars and bought planes. Japanese automakers cheered. Boeing popped champagne. And then, Japan's prime minister lost the election. Now Tokyo's wondering, will the next guy keep the deal? Or will Trump cancel it with one angry post on Truth Social? South Korea got a 25% tariff and immediately booked a flight to D.C. Finance Minister Coup was ready to beg, barter, maybe cry a little. Then, boom, meeting cancelled, 1 hour before takeoff. Reason? The U.S. had a scheduling conflict with China. In Sweden, Hyundai stock dropped. Officials panicked. And Japan, fresh off its deal, smirked across the sea of trade jealousy. Desperate for leverage, Seoul even offered to join Trump's $44 billion Alaska gas pipeline. Because in Trump's world, friendship doesn't waive the fee. Meanwhile, up north, Kim Jong-un didn't get a deal or a tariff, just blissful irrelevance. Lucky guy. Taiwan. Trump threatened a 32% tariff, but left one thing untouched: Taiwan's semiconductors. Smart move, because Taiwan isn't just a chip maker, it powers the world's tech. Taipei flew in negotiators, offered pork, gas, even missiles, just to keep the chip lanes open. And China watched from the sidelines, furious that Taiwan got tariffs and the kind of attention you don't give to provinces. Trump hit China with 34% tariffs, some goods taxed up to 145%. Then he slapped Vietnam, Malaysia, and Mexico too, just to stop China from relabeling exports like a global game of hide-and-seek. China hit back. 100% tariffs on U.S. goods. Blocked rare earths. No magnets, no missiles, no NVIDIA chips. U.S. factories panicked. China smirked. It controls 90% of the world's rare earths. After weeks of talks, a deal was made. Rare earths resumed, tariffs dipped, and quietly, NVIDIA's H20 chips got approved for export to China. Trump's message? Open your market. Cut the subsidies. And if you want U.S. chips, play by U.S. rules. Trump went nuclear on Russia, or at least threatened 100% to 500% tariffs on anyone still buying Russian oil. The Kremlin said they were analyzing. Translation, we're angry. But honestly, flattered he still remembers us. Putin didn't reply. He was too busy selling discounted oil to India, China, and North Korea, the only Tinder matches left. Meanwhile, U.S.-Russia trade is barely a rounding error. But Trump's warning was clear. If you keep buying Putin's oil, then you can forget about selling to America. Canada tried to tax U.S. tech giants, a bold 3% digital tax aimed at Google, Amazon, and Meta. Trump responded with a trade freeze and threatened 35% tariffs. That's when Canada remembered. It sends 75% of its exports to the U.S. and relies on America for NORAD, NATO, Netflix, and even missiles. So within 48 hours, Canada dropped the tax, smiled politely, and said it was just reviewing options. No deal was reached, just a very Canadian retreat. Because in Trump's world, you don't pick a fight with your landlord when you live in the basement. Trump hit Mexico with 25% tariffs on cars, tequila, and guac, then blamed them for fentanyl. Mexico pushed back. Trump threatened 30% by August 1st. They trade $800 billion a year. Mexico needs the U.S. market, but America still needs Mexican auto parts and border help. Talks are ongoing, but deep down, Mexican officials knew you can't negotiate with a guy who thinks fentanyl hides in a taco. Trump gave the EU a deadline: sign a deal by August 1st, or face up to 30% tariffs on cars, cheese, and luxury handbags. So Brussels panicked and scheduled an emergency committee. But before they could reply, they had to ask, do all 27 members agree on paragraph 2, subpoint B? Negotiating with the EU is like group chatting with 27 in-laws, and one of them always wants a footnote in French. They eventually reached a compromise, a 15% tariff deal. Not great, but hey, at least the handbags were spared. And just in case things fall apart, the EU has a secret weapon, the anti-coercion instrument, aka the trade bazooka. It lets them hit back with tariffs of their own, but it's never been used. Some say it's still in the box. Others say they lost the instructions, in French. Meanwhile, Trump's thinking, let's sell more weapons to NATO, and maybe slap tariffs on Ukraine too. Because in Trump's world, someone's always paying. Peace or war, wine or weapons. Trump cut U.S. auto tariffs on British exports from 27.5% to 10%, up to 100,000 vehicles, and dropped duties entirely on British steel and aluminum. In return, the UK agreed to open up to U.S. beef, ethanol, and yes, Boeing jets. PM Starmer called it a win. Then Starmer asked for more. Trump said, we'll see, maybe after the back nine. Because with Trump, every deal comes with a mulligan. Not everyone got an invite to Trump's tariff party. Brazil tried football diplomacy, sent jerseys, quoted Pelé, still got red-carded with a 50% tariff. Argentina offered its finest beef, and got beef right back. Tariffed like everyone else. No messy magic there. Switzerland got slapped with tariffs on luxury watches. In response, they declared neutrality, but harder. India didn't even get a letter. Trump just announced a 25% tariff, starting August 1st, with extra threats over Russia and oil. India assumed the worst, and raised its own tariffs in response. For fun. Call it strategic paranoia. Because in Trump's trade war, you're either negotiating or getting tariffed while wondering why. In the end, Trump didn't just write letters. He rewrote the global trade playbook. Now, every country is asking, do we make a deal or do we wait for the next letter? Tariffs have gone from economic tool to diplomatic love language. Some countries begged, some bargained, some framed the envelope. And Trump? He's already printing more stationery. Thank you for watching Pastcast, where the past echoes through today. If you enjoyed the satire, scrolls, and scandals, like, subscribe, and ring the bell before the next empire falls.